Continue same as Tote A, see steps 5 and 6. Stitching flap to upper edge of bag front. Turn to Tote A now, find steps 5 and 6. Step 5 reads, make flaps for pockets as follows. With right sides together, stitch flap to contrast flap along side and lower edges, leaving edge with large dots open. Trim seam, clip curves.
We are now going to be working on completing the flap for the pocket. This is going to be what covers the pocket opening. You have two pieces here. We are going to be sewing these together, right sides together. So the side that you want people to see is going to be touching. We are going to go ahead and pin this all the way around, making sure that everything matches up. I always start with pins on my curves. This allows there to be pins sticking straight out of my curve, which helps me measure when to turn the material underneath my machine. From here, it's just straight pinning, prepping it for sewing so your pins are facing out. When we stitch this together, we are going to be stitching along the outside, but not the top. We want the top to be left open so that we can flip this around so that people can see the nice side of the material. When we do stitch this, you want to make sure that you are stitching it with a nice curve, maintaining the 1/2 inch seam allowance along the way. Slow down if you feel like you are losing control, because a nice smooth curve is what we need to have occur here. We are now going to start to stitch the pockets together. Remember that we are stitching two things, so we are going to back stitch. Go ahead and start your stitching. 2 or 3 stitches is all we need. Pull your pins out as you come to them, keeping your focus on the outside to maintain that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, as we approach this curve, we want to make sure that we're coming around slowly. The machine is going to pull the material forward. All you have to do is steer. The best place to steer your material is going to be in front. So as it starts to come towards the curve, slow down, steer your material, nice and easy. All I am doing is pulling and steering my material as it comes around. I am not pushing it, I am letting the machine do the work for me. If you try to push or pull the material too much, you're going to lose control. This is all about control because we want to make sure that we have a nice smooth curve for our pocket flap. This is not a point, it is a curve. The only way to achieve that is to go nice and slow around the edge. You can see I'm coming up to the curve again. Allow the machine to pull the material through and steer from behind. When it becomes a sharper turn, just keep your steady pace and pull the material through as you are steering. As you come to the end, go ahead and sew to the edge, back stitch, and finish your stitch. Your curves should be nice and consistent without any jagged edges. If you see that your curve has a jagged edge, you're going to need to repeat this step.
To finish this step, we will trim the seam and clip curves. Clip curves is in bold lettering. This indicates that we will be referring back to the sewing directions to get further instructions on how to complete this step. The sewing instructions give us more detail on how to complete the step of clipping the curves. Clip curves to make seams lie flat. Inner curve. Make little clips or snips in the seam just to, but not through the stitching. Outer curve. Cut little wedge-shaped notches from seam allowance. Once we know how to clip curves, we need to decide if we are working with an inner curve or an outer curve. This will help us determine if we need to clip or notch.
Once you sew your two pieces of your pocket flap together, we are going to go ahead and trim along the edges. Because we have two curves, these are outside curves, we are going to go ahead and notch on the outside curves. The reason we do this is so that it releases pressure and allows the material to lay flat. The first notch should be directly into the middle of the curve. I'm also going to include two notches on either side to make sure that there is no pressure on the outside edge, which is going to allow your material to lay nice and flat. Repeat this on the other side. First one goes directly into the outside curve, and then two more on either side. Once you complete this, you're going to trim the seam allowance. When you trim the seam allowance, you're going to cut the seam allowance to 1/4, which is basically cutting the seam in half. We notch the corners first so that it allows us to not have to go back and cut little triangles or little notches later. Once you have done this, go ahead and start to trim. Remember to trim all the way around. This is going to allow, when we turn this right side out, for the flap to lay nice and flat and not pucker at the corners because of the outside curve. Once you are finished, it should look something like this.